The Hollywood have created some remarkable scripts over the years, wild outcomes, wild possibilities. You would have had to be a pretty good creative to sort this kind of script out.
I think, the last week has been the most extraordinary week in American politics in quite some time, decades. You may have to go back to the American Civil War. What we've seen here is astonishing. I think it could mark a turning point, as you've said, but I think one of the most troubling things is that there are signs here, too, that it's almost too late, that there are millions of Republicans who believe that an assault on democracy is completely acceptable. The early polling suggests nearly half of all Republicans viewed this siege in a positive light. That's startling, especially given some of the images that have emerged from the Capitol on Wednesday.
It's a difficult task for the President-elect Joe Biden and his administration, helped by the fact that the Democrats will have control of both houses.
Certainly, it's incredible that the Democrats taking the Senate in Georgia is arguably only the third biggest story in the week, behind the attempted insurrection at the Capitol and Trump's ban from Twitter. But the Biden administration is heading in certainly in a much stronger position than they expected to be. They can prove somewhat more progressive nominees than they assumed that they could. And also, I think that they can get a lot of legislation done that ordinarily would be held up by folks like Mitch McConnell. This is a much, much stronger position for that administration to have. But again, the politics of this moment are extraordinary. They'll also be dealing with hangover, but also, I think, very, very serious questions about what to do, not just with the events of the last week, but what we've seen over the last 4 years, frankly.
Now, for those that don't like the president, I suppose an air of relief is hanging, but that sigh of relief hasn't quite come yet because you've got to hang till January 20.
I think this is really the big thing to underline is, there are still 10 days left for this president to, engage in extraordinary behavior. What we've seen so far is every time an avenue has closed, he has pushed something that's more and more extreme. I think there are many people, both close to the president, as well as Democrats in Congress, figures in the American business community, just ordinary citizens who I think are quite rightly frightened about what could happen between now and Inauguration Day. The president has appeared to be chastened, but this is still Donald Trump. This is not someone who has evolved as a person or has had any kind of eureka moments and changed his ways. So I think what we're going to see, could really be extraordinary over the next 10 days.
How culpable do you think some of the other Republicans are, or many, particularly that backed and allowed it all to happen? Some are now reversing. And this is across many parts of society, members of the media and others that have just got on his bandwagon because it suited them.
Yeah, I think what we saw in the lead up to this moment was that there were a lot of Republicans who said, look, we can let this president punch himself out. We can humor him with these wild allegations of voter fraud. People like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, who played a pretty significant role in leading to this moment on Wednesday, were also people who said that this would be good, or thought that this would be good for them politically, that they could emerge as successors to this president. It's worth underlining again that they were not alleging widespread voter fraud. They were just saying millions of Americans were concerned about this, and yet they also helped contribute to this moment. I think the Republican Party is also in a little bit of a bind, as we saw in the most recent election. If Donald Trump is on the ballot, we do see a significant lift for down ballot candidates. But when Donald Trump isn't on the ballot, the Republicans, I think, are facing a pretty significant problem. What we saw in Georgia is similar to what we saw in 2018. Trump forces candidates to abide by all kinds of crazy loyalty tests that end up, I think, helping with some voters, but hurting significantly with others. And I think some Republicans are starting to get very concerned that they're damned if they do support this president and damned if they don't electorally. I think this could be a real problem in a lot of states.
We've seen democracy attacked this week, but there must be some sort of semblance of strength in the knowledge that the democracy is what has saved the day, really, at the end. God forbid what could have happened if this wasn't in the type of government that the United States, or Australia for that matter, have.
Certainly, I think that this moment, I think, was, as has happened a number of times, though this is certainly the most striking moment. But it's the moment of this democracy being tested. The guardrails have been off for quite some time. I think the event on Wednesday, could have been significantly worse. We're still talking about 6 people being killed, but it could have been much, much worse given the situation and given the fact that the president did not call in the National Guard in a timely manner. I think what we're going to see now are serious questions about what accountability means in this democracy. If moving on means sort of sweeping these events under the rug, or if people will acknowledge that maybe what we need to do is have some actual accountability for this extraordinary assault on our democracy.
Well, that accountability could account to prosecution to the president and many others.
Yeah, I think he was already looking at serious legal questions, mostly involving his finances. Now you also have, at best, I think, an incitement to riot based on Wednesday. That will be the article of impeachment that Democrats bring on Monday. I think that very slowly he has started to realize that, the extraordinary legal protections offered by the presidency will not be afforded to him in 2 weeks. Now, we will see, I think, efforts to move forward with prosecution in states. But the biggest question hanging over Merrick Garland, the federal judge who's expected to take over the Justice Department, is going to be what to do on a federal level about the president. Similarly, if the president tries to pardon himself, something we know he's discussed doing with his attorneys, that will also raise serious questions about the constitutionality of the pardon power itself.
Meanwhile, people are dying by the thousands. Records are being broken with this pandemic that's running riot, and the rollout of the vaccine just not working.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of those sort of split screen moments that really says so much about where we are. We've understandably focused so much on this assault on our democracy, but we've been so consumed by these lies about voter fraud in states across the country that the fact that this is an extraordinarily precarious moment, over 300,000 cases of COVID-19, has been largely forgotten. Similarly, there are big questions still about distributing this vaccine and getting it to people who need it. Here in New York, there's been tremendous difficulty so far, and this is going to be a huge hurdle for the Biden administration to jump over, because right now the American government has not figured out how to coordinate with the states and get the vaccine to the people who need it the most.
Finally, Alex, and we really appreciate you coming on the program on a weekly basis. You've offered us some great insight and will continue to do that. The President-elect Joe Biden said that Donald Trump is embarrassing, the worst president the country has ever seen. What do you think will happen to Donald J. Trump?
That is a question that I think if I was a betting man, I probably would have gone broke trying to answer so far. But I think at this point, based on the events on Wednesday, it's been much harder to answer. I think ordinarily, or before Wednesday, we expected the president to retreat to Florida, to continue to tweet these egregious lies about voter fraud, to establish himself as the leader of the Republican Party. It's worth noting that the RNC is, run by Trump loyalists, people with close ties to the president and his family. But I think his political future, much like his legal future, is much, much cloudier than it was before. There are a significant number of Republicans who back him to the hilt. But 57% of Americans want him removed from office right now. 70% disapprove of what happened on Wednesday. And those images are going to be shown in political ads for the next 2 years, certainly. If the president tries to run for a second term in 2024, it'll be a huge part of the political case against him. His political future, I think, is much, much cloudier than it was before Wednesday.
Thanks, Alex. Always good to catch up.
Thank you.